Well, tēnā koe mōrena, everybody. Nice to see you all. Good morning, all, one and all. It's lovely to see you all here this very fine morning, 26th of November. It feels like it was only March last week, but that's fine. It's just this big blur of busyness, right? Hey, we've all got our agendas before us, but before we kick off, could I invite you, Dale-Marie, to please open us with a karakia? Thank you so much.
Morena I te whare, ai tūtaua mai runga, tūtaua mai raro, tūtaua mai roto, tūtaua mai waho, kia tau ai, te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie hui e tai ki e. He mihi ka tika ki tō tātou kuini, nā waihono I te pō. He mihi ka tika ki nā I tuana o nā whānau, I tuana I te haka. Kia ora tātou.
Well, thank you, Dale-Marie. So, look, we all have our agendas in front of us. I'm just a couple of quick things to say. I won't bore you senseless with my ranting and raving, but obviously we're sort of racing frantically towards the end of the year. So for many of us, our days are populated not only with work, but also countdowns to Christmas and school prize givings and Christmas dues and what have you. My life's no different to that. Obviously, we've been all very much immersed in LTP workshops, waters discussions, and both of those issues were in part the focus of our rural and provincial meet just this last week in Wellington. Steph and I went down for the all sector and then rural and provincial meetings on the Thursday and Friday. Some really very clear messaging coming out of the Beehive around the request for collaboration, and yes, I'll kind of leave that there. And obviously, future challenges on our horizons are not all of our making at times. Oh, sorry, I have to turn my phone off. There's a lot of external issues influencing the future for us, which are beyond our control. So some really great discussions, I think, had at that level. So look, without any further ado, let's rip into our agenda. First item is apologies. I have one for Marcus. He's about to go swimming with turtles, I believe, in Hawaii. I'm not going to move that. I do not accept that. Yeah, thank you, Claire. As well, and Andrew will second that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Disclosure of members' interests. Nobody's advised me of there being any, and I can't think of any at the moment that would arise in particular. So that was just for noting. Anyway, moving on, late items. Again, I'm not aware of there actually being any matters that meet that threshold that need to be raised. No. Fantastic. Next item then is confirmation of order of meeting. I'm not aware of there needing to be any changes, so I'll move from the chair. Lou will second that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Confirmation of minutes. So appearing there on page shivers, my timbers, my goggles on. Page 8 is a paper, but the documents appear there. They've been pre-circulated. I'm not aware of there being any fundamental flaws to those papers. So is somebody willing to move that for me? Claire will move that they're true and correct, and Dale-Marie will second that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Just checking you were both there, so you can. That is correct. Fantastic. On then to the first item of any particular import as our documents signed under council seal, and I will pass this one over to you, Steph. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm happy to move. Shivers, I forgot to turn the thing on. Yes, that's moved by Liz, seconded by Mike Pettit. Motion put and carried. So then on to our next significant item is the Alcohol Fees Bylaw 2024 Adoption Report. And Mika, this is yours. Nice to see you. Good morning, Morena. The floor is yours. We obviously have the report in front of us and hearings and significant activity taking place on this one, but I shall leave it for you to take the report.
Oh, thank you. I take the report as read. So starting off with the Alcohol Fees Bylaw Adoption Report. So it was recommended after the deliberations on 22 October this year to adopt the Alcohol Fees Bylaw, the draft Alcohol Fees Bylaw without any changes. And yeah, pretty much it.
Thank you, Mika. Any discussion or questions arising in respect of this matter?
And I was happy to second.
Okay, so Bruce will move that. Liz will second it. I will put the motion in respect of that recommendation. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. That was quick and painless. Yeah. Yeah, it certainly indicates the amount of work that has gone into it, doesn't it? Fantastic. Thanks very much, Mika. And your next one, that alcohol control bylaw.
The alcohol control bylaw has gone through all the determination steps for making a bylaw. So it is determined, we determined what problems exist and if a bylaw is the best way to address those problems, determined whether the proposed bylaw is the most appropriate form, determine whether the proposed bylaw gives rise to any implications under the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. It does, but it's not inconsistent with that act. Where a proposed alcohol control bylaw is intended to replace an existing alcohol control bylaw, it is determined that the proposed bylaw meets the criteria set out in the Local Government Act. And is the same effect or substantially the same effect as the expiring bylaw. And so, and then at the determinations on the 22nd of October, it was recommended to adopt the draft bylaw following the changes that were made after public consultation, and a minor change be made to section 11 transitional provisions. Any questions?
Thanks, Mika. Questions? Philip and then Liz.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your reports and all the work that you've done with this. I've just got a question that I've been questioning staff about a little bit with around the dog bylaws as well. But you mentioned, it was mentioned in the consultation and everything about good signage around our parks and reserves and things like that. What measures are in place with that? Because we were, with the dog bylaw, we were told that there was going to be good signage around the place, and that's been some time. What's the go with, because there's budgeting, money available and things to do these things. So is there money there to put good signage up?
There is some money. So there are some signs being, there are existing signage in the current alcohol ban areas. And then we are adding some more signage around the main centre, like within Te Amuru, Kieki, Cambridge, Leamington, adding a couple more signs in there. And we are also just waiting for some more possible signs to even increase what's already there, and the couple that we're adding. And then we have some, I guess, sort of temporary stickers for the cemeteries and the playgrounds, just because we are waiting for those signs to be redone completely, and we want it all to be cohesive. So there will be signs, but they will be even better later when all of that gets redone.
Just one other quick little thing. So on the signage, what about lakes and reserve where people are water skiing or picnicking and things like that, which is going to happen a lot now with the summer months, does it need to have additional signage in those
Yes,
areas?
so
or-
sorry, so Bulmers Landing and Arapuni Landing will also get signage for the alcohol ban areas. And this is all going to, so the way this one works is after this, there will be a public notice in the newspaper, and that unless anything falls out of this meeting, we'll say that on the 16th of December, it'll come into effect, and the signs will be up before then. So, yeah, and the police have been notified because they're the ones that are enforcing this bylaw. So.
Okay, great. And thanks for all your work, and happy to move this when the time comes.
Thank you, Philip. Liz?
Yeah, look, lots and lots of work has been done on this for quite a few months, actually, years now. So happy to second it. Thanks.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. So I have a mover and a seconder. Any other questions before I put the motion? As noted, there's been a lot of work done on this. Yeah. Okay, there being no further discussion, I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Great stuff. So the next item is, of course, our LAP, which I just over the page, another one of yours, Mika, the Local Alcohol Policy Adoption Report appearing at page 128 of our package. I will hand over back to you then to address.
Thank you. So the local alcohol policy, there were a couple of changes following consultation, and at the deliberations on the 22nd of October, it was agreed to adopt the draft local alcohol policy subject to minor typographical changes. One of those changes, which you might have noticed, is on the front page, that it says 2025 local alcohol policy, not the 2024. And that is due to a bit of a legislative quirk in that it's subject to when the public notice goes out. And so the public notice will go out, and 30 days after the public notice goes out, it is formally adopted. So it actually gets adopted in January. You don't have to do anything, but yeah, it just means it falls just within 2025. And then it comes into effect 3 months after it gets adopted in January. So we're aiming for the 10th of March for it to formally come into effect. Yeah, that's it. Any questions?
Good stuff. Any questions? Claire will move that. Any questions? No, no questions. Again, well traversed this area. Andrew will second it. I will put the motion in respect of that recommendation appearing on page 128. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Good stuff. Congratulations. Yeah, look, well done, staff. That's been a bit of a haul, right? It's not easy. It's not an easy legislative landscape to navigate through, and as you say, some kind of odd quirks and peculiarities in it. So thank you very much for your collective work team. It's great achievement to get that one across the line. So well done. Cool. Next item then is one of Diana's. It's an update to council delegations. Good morning, Diana. Nice to see you.
Tēnā koutou. The purpose of my report today is to seek agreement to some relatively minor changes to delegations to staff. So I take the report as read, but just highlight the key points. The first is just to update the delegations to account for a new setting of speed limits rule. So this is a 2024 rule to replace the 2022 rule. The next update is to account for the newly made local alcohol bylaw. So the delegations register will be updated to account for that change. And then finally, the Regulatory Committee had made a recommendation for council to delegate to staff authorities to approve 10 environmental benefit lots for any one application rather than 5. So the report seeks council approval to implement that recommendation. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Yeah, a bit of an omnibus of changes there, but don't know what you would have done if we hadn't agreed to that bylaw, but anyway. We had to lose that one, but no, hot off the press. Any questions in respect of these delegations? Seem thoroughly sensible to me. Lou, you're going to move it? And Philip, you'll second it? Excellent. There being no further discussion, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Great stuff. Thank you so much, Dana. Okay, so our next item on our agenda, which has also taken up a great deal of staff time, energy and focus on behalf of the organisation as a whole for some time now, obviously, is the Waikato Water Done Well Heads of Agreement. So I shall hand the floor over to you. Dawn, nice to see you. Good morning. And yes, obviously we have the report in front of us, but the floor is yours.
Morena koutou, I know that as one of the primary people leading this piece of work, our Chief Executive would like to provide a bit of an introduction.
Kia ora, Susan. Kia ora, morena tātou, nice to see everybody and greetings to people online. I guess just some contextual pieces from me before we lead into this. This represents 18 months worth of work and it was prior to my time here, but I understand it was the Waikato Mayors and Iwi Chairs Forum that directed this piece of work in anticipation of the change in government and the repeal of the previous Three Waters reform and leading to Waters Done Well reform led by the National Government Coalition. As you understand, as you know, some months ago, about 3 months ago, 4 months ago, Hamilton City Council pulled out of the regional Waters Done Well work and is pursuing its own pathway, including its own CCO. And so since then, all of the other Waikato councils have remained at the table and been working really well together with the CEs and our respective GMs meeting weekly and a lot of work in between. I hope that the recent workshops we've had have provided really good context for you and given a sense of not only the sort of the situation at play in terms of the waters investment needed in the Waikato, but also the regulatory, economic and future environment for Three Waters investment required across the Waikato, which is the sum total of something like $5 billion over 10 years. So it is substantial investment in our respective communities. It's also become very obvious that our communities are moving to work, live, play, study across the Waikato, and our communities are inherently connected, and that's certainly evidenced in the conversations and the context, I guess, as we have negotiated this Heads of Agreement. It has taken concerted and deliberate effort to get to this point. It's had legal review, independent legal review. Remind me, Dawn, who did the legal review for Kāhui Manawa?
I believe it was Simpson Grierson.
Simpson Grierson, wasn't it? Yeah. So the Heads of Agreement has had legal review. And ultimately now, each of the councils is contemplating signing up to the Heads of Agreement and moving into the next stage of work. I think it's really important at this point just to again say, particularly perhaps for people who are listening, but again, just for our own sake, really, that we don't have all the answers at this point in time. And I recognise that that might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but the next stage of work will start to get into some substantial financial modelling, and that work's already begun. We've supplied all of our information. Other councils are doing similar. So there will come a point when that is comes to light that we will have more information about how different models will serve Waipa. We are fortunate in that we're in a position where we have got options. So that's a great place to be. It probably makes it a little bit more complicated as well, but I think it's always a much stronger position to have options. And I certainly think that this is one that provides a lot of merit in many different ways. We have been very clear about what our issues are and what our success factors are. I think we've got a pretty good idea of bottom lines, but we'll keep talking through that in coming months, as well as our success factors. And we need to look carefully at all of our options for the benefit of our community and to make sure that Waipa and the Waikato region is well positioned. I think there are a couple of, just without wanting to, I don't want to complicate the conversation, but I want to be really clear that last night we had a conversation again between Martin Jenkins representatives and the people leading Waikato Waters Done Well. And I just want to note that there were a few points in Martin Jenkins' report in terms of the assessment of options. And it's really, I feel it's imperative that I just clarify those points for you so that you have full and frank information. But effectively, the points were just clarifying that until we know which councils are in which different models, that again plays through in terms of a little bit of uncertainty and what the financial modelling will look like. And the Martin Jenkins team last night agreed that that assumption needs to be very clear, that in terms of the options, they are very dependent on which councils join which model. In terms of options 3 and 5, in terms of the sub-regional water services option and the wider Waikato regional one. The other issue that we talked about last night was the issue of the Southern Wastewater Treatment Plant, and that without the Bill 3 and a greater understanding of the economic regulator, there are still some question marks about if there was to be future investment into a large plant like the Southern Wastewater Treatment Plant, would that necessarily need to be in one council's territory, or could it be in another council's territory? And CCOs have a way of managing investment into a plant in another's within another's boundary. So that was a really good topic of conversation last night, because if we take the current position, you would think a boundary change would be required, but we talked through the fact that actually there's no substantive kind of clarity on that at the moment. So we know that those things are yet to be worked through, but I suspected that that was a question on some of your minds, but particularly we know that the Northern Waipa, Southern Hamilton area is going to be a substantial area of growth. So what does that look like? And the other point was that on the table, it did talk about across the region, other councils having greater debt, sustainability and affordability challenges. That should have said then Waipa. So it just goes to show that, you know, other councils have got their own challenges, whether it's debt or affordability. So we just wanted to be really clear so that there's no misunderstandings, but largely that I think this has got us, I think I would put this on the table as a very strong document. It's been rigorously debated and discussed between the councils. As I say, it's had good legal purview and review. And we're at the point now where it is the time to show confidence in the model and discuss whether we go to, whether we signed the heads of agreement, in what stage do we go straight to indicate preference to go straight to stage 2, as we discussed in our workshops, and that takes us into the next stage with the councils working into the trend, the next stage of financial modelling and also transition planning. So that's just sort of, I thought, some, I hope, helpful comments. But I also want to thank councillors. I'm always so aware that we're often in this work for hours and hours and hours every day, and have the benefit of lots of conversations with lots of people. And it comes to you as a document that's quite dense, a lot of detail and complexity to it. And so I want to thank you for all leaning into those workshops we've had. And for the perseverance of you all too, as we're into the second round of Waters reform. So I just want to acknowledge all of the councillors and the team, Dawn and her team. Ken's team's been a little bit over this in terms of the financial modelling and the work they've done, but I just want to thank the teams involved behind us as well.
Great.
Thank you, Susan.
No, thanks for that context and actually the update in terms of some of those issues that may have arisen out of the documents, in particular the piece relating to the city's Southern Wastewater Treatment Plant. Obviously, it's very much an issue of interest to us to get some real clarity around for obvious reasons. So thanks for that. Now I have a question or conversation from Liz and then Roger.
Yeah, no, I was just about the Southern Wastewater Treatment Plant. I'm just a little bit confused because my understanding with the treatment plant is it's not the city's wastewater treatment plant. It is a regional wastewater treatment plant, correct? Well, the group that was set up that Mayor Jim chaired for several years, it was a cross council southern wastewater treatment plant. So I just think that we just need to clarify that it's not the cities. So I guess that's just a point of clarification. So in terms of where boundaries are, sort of, that's not really an issue for me at the moment. Probably what's more of an issue is it's not featuring in our LTP. So that's a conversation, it's an LTP conversation. So that's probably where I think we were starting to have some questions around that as to the city appear to be including it in their LTP, but we aren't at this point. So that's probably just a question later for an LTP discussion, that's all.
Cool. Roger.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for that background, Steph. And as you know, I did ask a question as to how would two CCOs actually work together, and that's an unknown quantity. We've got to assume that as the individual councils do work well together now, that will continue like future-proof works currently. So that's, I think, something which we'll see in the future, but we shouldn't be too worried about that now. What does, however, and I just need clarification, we're talking about the cost related to the number of councils that are participating. And I know that we're keeping our options open, which I like, and I think that's the whole purpose of this heads of agreement, is keeping our options open. First question is, and Ken, it might be to you, whatever the amount of the phase 2 cost per council is that included within our current LTP?
So thank you for the question, Councillor. Look, it's not specifically provided for in the LTP. So look, you know, there are some options in terms of some funding that we have got, but look, we'll have to work through that as we go.
I think we might just ask Dawn for some clarification too, because she's familiar with this.
Okay, yep, thanks.
Lovely, thank you. So at the moment, we've been utilising funds that were allocated to the work to date. That's almost fully committed. So that was the previous transition funding that the DIA made available to us. You'll recall that we had a number of projects that were sitting in our Better Off funding sort of allocation, and with the new direction of the government, we repurposed that funding back into waters projects. One of those was an allocation set aside to fund this work. So so that funding is set aside in terms of for this. So there is an allocation of funding. However, there is also a live conversation that we're having around as we move into transition sort of planning and actual CCO establishment costs, a conversation with agencies around at what point that becomes a cost to the CCO in terms of that transfer of liability, I guess, to the CCO. So where all of those fall is I guess subject to further debate.
But in terms of the investigative work and the heads of agreement, then we're covered for that work with existing funds. So that's not going to affect the ratepayers in terms of the LTP. We've got that protected. It's already there. It's not going to require additional funding.
Yes, that is
Lovely.
correct.
Good, thank you. And another than that, I think we need to keep our options open. And we've got two of which are with joint CCOs, and the third is the fallback, should we decide that the fallback is necessary of going to our own CCO. So I think we keep all options open. Yeah. And I think there's no point in us going to phase 1, to my mind, because we can do that ourselves now. So, and we do it very well now, which is for the provision of service. Phase 2 seems the logical option to move. Phase 2. Yep. Yep.
I've got Claire.
Thanks. Yeah, and I really appreciate, Steph, you updating us on this, and I think what you're able to share with what's happening in all the negotiations, I think it's really helpful in that. Yeah, so I appreciate that. I did have just a couple of questions. On page 186, there's a chart that shows the challenges of participating councils, and there's grey shaded area cells there. One of the columns doesn't have a title. I'm not sure actually if there is something missing or if it's maybe just a double up of the community affordability. But the reason I draw attention to it is that I do recall a previous table like this where Waipa only had one coloured cell, which was the debt capacity. So I'm really surprised that now we have 5 coloured cells, especially community affordability and capital works delivery, both of which I understand we're performing really well on. I'm not sure how accurate that table is.
I think Dawn's going to speak to those, Claire, but I also think that one of the things, the context of this is, as the different bills have come to light and the government's been clearer about what it's requiring and the region has thought about the regional context, then things are always moving. It's the context is changing, so we have to assess our capacity and capability in light of new measures or new indicative sort of benchmarks. And through conversation, everybody is becoming more aware of a consistent approach to rating those things. Because one thing that I've noticed in the CE conversations is that people are often putting up their assessments of themselves based on different assumptions. So we've had to keep adjusting and moving, which I think is a good thing, because we're being agile and flexible and open rather than sticking to a position. And I'm saying this for all councils about ourselves as that context and conversation matures. But Dawn can probably talk at a more detailed level than I can to the specific indicators.
Can I just add before we move on, that's an extra column.
Okay.
Yeah, there were
Doesn't
only ever
mean-
7 attributes that were assessed against, but certainly the ticks have moved.
Mhm.
Thank you. So I guess in terms of the sentence immediately above the table, it references a 10-year period. So when we initially did the table, we were looking at kind of current state, and absolutely in terms of where we're at now, it's debt capacity, community affordability. But once we put that what does it look like in 10 years lens over this, when you look at the ageing workforce and when you look at the stream of people coming into the workforce, and then the challenge we would have in terms of competing with others for that capital works delivery, given the high level of investment, that if we kept our current arrangements, they would be our challenges. So it was really extending that lens that led us to kind of identifying those further challenges.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I presume that as this work progresses, we'll get more detail on those various challenges as they've morphed over time. Yeah, so yeah, because I was surprised with some of them. And the second question I had was in the appendix, which is on page 224, and it's about how incoming shareholders would have to pay some kind of a contribution to the existing shareholders. And that formula, yeah, I think that it might be better to format it in a different way, because it looks like the overall contribution plus the cost of establishment of the CCO, so that all together is divided by, and then the current number of the connections in the CCO multiplied by the number of the new connections, which actually, because you're increasing the number of connections, that's dividing that total number, it would actually come out to a really small number. I thought it might be that the multiplication of the number of connections in the service area of the incoming shareholder might be sort of what that previous statement was being multiplied by. Yeah. So rather than dividing, yeah. So, yeah, it just
Yeah,
makes sense
talk
otherwise.
to you about, this has been a subject of great conversation, so I'll take your points and come back to you on that one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Mike Pettit.
Yeah, thank you through the mayor. Yeah, a couple of things. Hey, one, we talked about the other day, I think in a workshop about the working with the contractors and smoothing the workload and having those discussions over 10 years. So there's not highs and lows, which is beneficial for everyone. That board competency thing, that board is made up quite of a specific type of people, which is obviously gives me confidence that the things are being run well. I also look at this same chart on page 186 that Claire was referring to. And I guess this is out to the other councils where if I look at workforce availability, we've all got issues apart from Thames Coromandel. I look at debt capacity, there's no issues apart from Waikato and Waipa. Mate, if I was those councils and I was some debt ceiling, I'll be going, how can we set up a civil business to actually deal with some of the capacity that we're going to need? Because, it's an opportunity there that we need the capacity somewhere. Why not the councils be involved in trying to deliver it and make some coin along the way? So I'm just putting it out there as a general to whoever's listening sort of thing, but it's an opportunity because, $5 billion over 10 years is $500 million a year of infrastructure work, which clearly we cannot cope with unless you're in possibly Thames Coromandel.
Yeah, kia ora, Mike. I think you've hit the nail on the head, and particularly given our anchor institution framework as well about growing our local economy, the impact of local procurement, pathways to employment, all of those great outcomes for communities will be a real function of the CCO should it be formed, whichever CCO model we go for. I think it's the workforce capability and capacity is going to be a key focus for that CCO.
Just one supplementary question. Can anyone tell me why Otorohanga have no issue with community affordability? Just explain, genuine question, why aren't they ticked? Is it less money they have to pay in there, or are they richer, or how does that work? Will they just miss the box?
We don't have any empirical evidence, so this was based on feedback from their chief executive. So it was a subjective assessment. I understand that they've engaged with Martin Jenkins as well to do analysis. So we may be able to source some of that in time as we move into the next phase of analysis.
Right. Yeah, I love those self-assessments. Well done, Otorohanga.
Just proves the point.
Philip.
Yep, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Just item 3, the recommendation, just a form of clarification on C, recommendation C, principal preferred. So that's only just a principle. It's not still keeping our options open. We're not going straight to stage 2.
Philip, which page are you on?
180 on diligent.
180, thank you.
Confirms
Oh.
council's in principle preferred position
So that's
is to go
still,
directly to stage 2.
what?
The whole sentence says that the recommendation is that we confirm that council's preferred position in principle under the heads of agreement is to go directly to stage 2. To not just floss around with stage 1,
Right.
to go straight to stage 2.
right. Okay, gotcha. Okay, right. Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
Highly technical term there, floss around, just pointing out. Monty.
Thanks, Susan. Seeing this is so important, I figure I better say something. So look, I started this whole waters thing with a completely open mind. If I'm totally honest, I probably had a natural inclination towards keeping it in-house, just because that was just, I don't know, there was just a natural inclination, okay? But I tried really hard to keep an open mind. As I've gone through this, it has become pretty clear to me that a CCO in one form or another is almost an inevitability. And the option of keeping the Waikato Waters Dunwell as a regional CCO is really compelling. To kill this now would be really, really bad. So I'm fully in support of signing up to this heads of agreement and carrying on. And yeah, that's me.
Cheers, Monty. Liz?
Yeah, look, my comments probably are very similar to what I said last time. I'm very happy with the heads of agreement. I think this is a natural progression for us. I still have some concerns around timing. I think that's very ambitious actually, to bring our community with us on this journey, and as well as negotiating all the finer points and the detail that's required to work with whoever we end up working with. So that's just I'd rather signal now that I feel like it should take longer to get the best outcome for our community. And the other thing is, of course, this feels like our community are fatigued with a lot of this information. So yeah, the sooner we start engaging with them on what our preferred options are, and obviously today's the day where we can start doing that. So really, really confident in our team to be able to get good messaging out there about what our preferred options are at this point. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't dictate the timelines. That's from Wellington. So yeah, we're up against it along with everybody else. Roger.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think one of the things which is not mentioned in the recommendation, but I think is really important for our consideration with these options, is the fact that some of the prior underinvestments of the individual councils are being established and looked at as an existing call on those particular council entities. So my concern that I had, of course, was certain entities not having water meters, which particularly water meters are going to be accepted as an underinvestment. So we won't be lumbered with the overall cost of those. And I think that's an important factor. So it certainly removed one of the inequitable concerns that I had about entering into any CCO. So I think that's worthwhile actually putting on the table at this stage that those concerns have been addressed.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks for pointing that out. And certainly price harmonisation is a trend, it will take time. I mean, that's something that's always borne out pretty loud and clear. Lou.
Yeah, thank you very much, and through the chair. I tend to agree with our deputy mayor a little bit. We're stuck with the timeframes. Yeah, no, I do. I think we're stuck with the timeframes. I think that we've got to have a real open book. We've got to go out there and approach all the other councils. There can't be anything hidden. For example, we just talked of Otahonga. I know for a fact that Kawhia is part of Otahonga, and they do not have sewage, they have septic tanks. That could be a major cost to everybody. You know, these are the things that we need to have upfront so that we can go into a CCO with knowledge of where we are all going to have to make commitments, whether they're going to be charged locally or whether they're going to be charged, locally, like I say, like targeted rate, or whether they're going to actually just be put into the overrunning costs of the CCO. The other thing that worries me too is that we need to take an example of growth. We need to be able to control growth. We don't want the CCO actually dictating where we're going to expand our cities and our towns, etc. Because there is the fear here that if they dictate where the pipes and sewage and everything go, they will have a huge impact in where we actually present. So that's why I'm saying we have to go in with this open book, and we have to have a full declaration by all parties concerned, because if you're going into any partnership, you need to know exactly what you're signing up and who you're signing up with and what you're actually going to have to front up to.
Yeah, like, I tend to agree with you, Lou, but to Steph's point earlier, we don't simply have the answers to everything. Clarity on some points is still slightly elusive, and as we move through this process, things will become clearer. So it's a fine balance, right, between transparency as best we're able, but at the same time appreciating we're not going to have all the answers right now and have everything down to the last cent to find. So it's very they're both lofty. Well, the transparency is a very lofty goal to attain to, but there has to be that little rider of, a lot of the stuff will become clearer through the passage of time.
Can I make a point?
Yeah,
Susan?
absolutely.
Sorry, I think we could talk about the 3 T's, Lou, to your point. One is transparency through this early establishment phase, and I think it is really important. But then we're talking about transition, and we've heard from Watercare, we've heard from TasWater, and many other examples where this is about transition, at least for the first 10 years. And then we can start to think about transformation. So the driving cost savings through efficiency, through different ways of working with Taumata Arawai or the regional council about how to improve water standards, water quality standards in a whole catchment. The transformation comes last. So transparency at the outset, then we're into transition, and everyone will be doing their best to make sure that on day one, everything works. We slowly build the organisation, whether it's billing or where staff are sitting, or there's a transition phase, and we just need to know that that will take time. And then we get to the transformation. So the 3 T's, I think, are really important to retain. And also for our community, in terms of expectations of the organisation, and to be very clear that on day one, we just want everything to work as we come together. But great points, Lou. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Pettit and then Andrew.
Thank you, Chair the Mayor. Hey, a very good point there, Councillor Brown. So that's probably about stage 8, what you were talking about, and the 4th tier, of course, would be transfer, which is all down the track. But that's a conversation for another day. I'd just like to remind us that Councillor Andrew Brown was a true believer in this in a different form from the very beginning when it comes to motioning this.
Good point. Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor Pettit. Yeah, so, I mean, lots of points, all valid, being talked about. I just thought, this is, unlike Councillor Montgomery, this is my 3rd go round on this, particular, all in different forms, admittedly. But I just wanted to make the point, and I know there's differences of opinion around the table, and that's fine. But the reports we've had going right back to Cranley, reviewed several times, the DIA with 3 Waters, again, stress tested, all the rest of it. And to be, accurate, I guess, literally every Waters engineer I have talked to has all said the benefits of a larger organisation with more connections are tangible, and they are over, several different things: capex, opex, staff, from many staffing from the point of view of the staff as well as obtaining the skills we need. So yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely, I think that stage 2 is indicated. I'm very happy to vote for this recommendation. I also think we do have to keep our options open.
Yeah.
It's only sensible that we do that, but we can't simply blindly go into a bigger organisation or operation. But then again, that's what we have, qualified, experienced staff to help us negotiate those things, properly. So, and look, just as a little bit of an aside, I guess, I've always thought waters, it makes sense that the catchment is what our, operating, our CCO should be looking after the catchment. And it can be dealt with better on many different levels and many different aspects of it if we do that. And I think hopefully that's where we're actually going to be heading, but we'll see. So, yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I would like to move the recommendation as it stands. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. I will second that, but let's just see if there's any further discussion or questions around it. Roger.
Thank you, Your Worship. At this point, I'm totally in favour, but I wanted just perhaps to get an assurance, and I don't know how you can word it, that there is the option that's still there of a sub-regional CCO. Those discussions are continuing, and that is an alternative to this Waikato Waters Well Done.
It's
But
there
that's not included in here.
Paragraph E.
Oh, sorry.
To be undertaken in parallel to investigate further any collaborative sub-regional CCO
Okay,
water services
thank you.
delivery. So we're
Yeah,
keeping two
without
pots on the
actually
stove.
naming what it is, because we can't do that, but that is still an option. Thank you. And
We've got 2 pots on the stove.
yeah, we got 3 pots on the table.
3. but
Yeah.
Yeah, Liz.
Hey, look, just the report that we've got, the challenges of participating councils. I think it was probably a surprise to me that we've just been, as our discussions have evolved today, that it was a self-assessed. I wonder if that should be changed in our report, because when I read this, I assumed that there'd been almost an independent assessment across councils. But if it's self-assessed, that's quite different. Just the note that I guess came through Councillor Pettit's Butcherhonga.
So I think we'll just be clear, Liz, rather than changing the report, just for the record, that in doing your sustainability and viability reports, which you have to do for your water services plan, generally they're being done by independents, whether that's Martin Jenkins or Becker or Maffick. People are doing those in different forms. So we put up our LTP work programs. Somebody assesses those for the purposes of the water services plan. As you know, they've gone through several iterations. DIA are also having conversations. We've had them in the House here, talking with each council about that interrogation of the data, the work program. So they're going through several iterations in different formats at different times, and councils are working their way through that. So at the first glance, when we first put out information, it was a self-assessment against those 7 criteria, just for the initial stages. But as I say, things have evolved since then, and we're all now doing our sustainability and viability assessments. And I am looking at Dawn to say, I think for the most part, most councils have got independent organisations in having a look at those. So at first, to sum that up, in the first round, it would have been self-assessment. It's now getting into some quite rigorous independent assessment.
Okay, all right, I'm happy with that. I just wanted to clarify that because it just felt like a little bit of a red flag, that's all. Thanks.
Yeah, so to that end, our initial assessment back in, and I'm trying to find the date of the document, I think was July last year. Yeah, can't recall. We only had ticked debt capacity and community affordability, and that's now updated too. So as it's more of a refinement, I guess, of that work. So it's not only us that have changed, not changed, but had clarity around those longitudinal challenges, but as two have others. So yes, the original table was produced on the 22nd of July 2024 to the Mayoral and Iwi Chairs Forum. So that's where that first appeared, but I think we've as we've set out, as time has gone by, those numbers have been more refined and the same metrics used or similar metrics used, and now more independent information provided to them. Claire.
Yeah, thanks. And like, I think I'd just like to say a bit more about the complexity of this and the fact that, you know, we do need to take small steps and check as we go, I think. And that's why I am happy about that extra work that's being done sort of in an independent level. And I'm really hoping that we will take sort of a results and a performance kind of approach that we'll be making sure that the benefits that we foresaw, are being achieved in that. You know, I'm aware that there hasn't been a lot of sort of review of the, I suppose, the sector and whether or not other reforms actually achieved the outcomes that they wanted. You know, like I did do quite a bit of research on this at the time of the Waikato Water Study in 2013 and 2014, and they don't always eventuate, and that's one of the points I was trying to make about Wellington Water. The best of intention there was forecast that there'd be easy savings and improvement in outcomes in that. That hasn't happened, but we are seeing, I suppose, a range of different models. You know, we've heard from Taswater and Watercare as well. So that's given me, you know, I suppose, comfort that there's, I suppose, where we're looking, you know, widely to make sure that we understand, what might happen. And so that's, I think, we can't just assume that we just go in and it's all going to be rosy. You know, that's why, I'm keen to have a cautious approach. But I'm comfortable with what we're seeing, I guess. Like with the original Cranley report, you know, for Waipa, the report said we could expect $107 million of savings in the first 10 years. Over 50 million of that was a combined wastewater treatment plant with Hamilton based on the CapEx savings. Since then, you know, we had a detailed business case done, and Hello was actually going to cost us $84 million more. Okay, so completely different to what was indicated in that high-level report. So that's why I'm cautious. That's why I'm saying there still can be risks. We still need to manage this really well. I'm really pleased with the steps that are being taken so that we're not going to have nasty surprises. We're looking after our community's interests. Actually, as Mayor Susan does say, we're actually taking a broader approach. We're trying to look after, you know, get an outcome that's going to be good for the Waikato. And it's going to make sense for all of us. So I guess summing it up, encourage what's happening. I'm just being cautious and appreciating that there's still some risks involved.
Thanks, Claire. Really appreciate your observations and comments there. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks. Just, a couple of comments there. I think what Claire has mentioned, in particular Wellington Water and Tasmanian Water, like the critical element is that Wellington Water was not an asset owning CCO and Tasmania is, and effectively in the one model, politics is effectively taken out of it. On the other, it was not. And, you know, I have to say, political interference in what is, for all intents and purposes, a utility is not a good thing.
Totally agree. Excellent. Hey, any further discussion, questions of Dawn or other staff in respect of this matter before we move on to putting the motion? Look, I just wanted to acknowledge staff who have absolutely worked their brains and fingers almost to the bone. It's particularly, obviously, Steph, Dawn and Sharon and others. You know, like this, I really want to emphasise and highlighting, Claire has said there, the complexity of this area, the size of it, the importance of it, how critical a success in this area is for almost everything about our district and our people. And also emphasising the ever-moving Mercury-like nature of the reform. You know, it's sort of unfolding, sort of stay tuned for the next episode kind of approach of the old days. Of TV series, remember those? We used to wait for next episode, and no such thing as binge watching now. But look, as I digress. Look, it's been a really challenging landscape, and I think also particularly I want to acknowledge Steph because she sort of jumped in midstream. You should see the pun there. And that's not an easy thing, bearing in mind the aforementioned challenges. So look, I just want to, mihi to staff for their work in this area. It's not been easy because of course we've got the LTP trucking along there too, which has not an easy piece of work to be working alongside either. So look, with that said, and assuming there are no further questions or discussion to be had on this matter, I have Councillor Andrew Brown having moved. This will give you great delight, won't it, Andrew? And I'm happy. I'm very comfortable and eager to second the motion. I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Great stuff.
Thank you.
That's
councillors.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks, Sharon.
My pleasure. Wonderful. So that brings to the conclusion our open session in respect of today's council meeting. So I have a resolution to exclude the public just to confirm our previous PX meeting minutes. But I know we have 2 workshops. We may look at bringing them slightly ahead potentially the time. Are we going to be able? It's probably not worth it. Not too much time to gain there. So look, we shall return at just before 11 to conduct our open workshops, 2 open workshops there. But I have a resolution to exclude the public. Philip, you're happy to move that. I will second it from the chair. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Morena, everybody, welcome back. We have two workshops this morning. The first of these is on traffic calming. It's following obviously a request from elected members to have a discussion and understand a little bit more about this area. So welcome, Brian, the floor is yours. And obviously we do have the slideshow in our pack, but I'll leave it to you to take away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dawn, did you want to say anything? No, you're okay. Very good. So thank you very much, Madam Chair and councillors. So as noted there in the purpose on the first page to provide information to elected members from their request to talk about, why we do traffic calming, what works well, what doesn't, what we've heard from our community and road users, what does it cost, how do we engage with our community before we do works like this, and to look at some Waipā examples of work that we have done in this area. And I provided a bit of background information about what happens in other road controlling authorities and national standards. So then slide number 3, why do we have traffic calming? Just some reasons there at the top. So traffic calming is not new. It's as old as the motor car. And in fact, when motor cars first came onto roads in some jurisdictions, a person had to walk in front of the motor car with a flag and make sure the motor car didn't exceed a certain speed limit so that horses and people weren't frightened or run over. So as cars have got faster and our communities got more populous, there is a need for more traffic calming in a way. So ideally traffic moves through an area at sort of uniform speeds, and certainly at conflict points, people can make decisions about whether to cross the road or not. So common complaints that staff and I'm sure councillors have had from residents that traffic is too fast in my street. Children can't walk or ride to school because there's no safe places to cross the road. There's excessive traffic in my street. Why is it not staying on the main roads? Why is it coming through a quiet residential street? And the other one that we often get, there was another crash at the intersection last night where a car failed to give way and just went straight through and hit a car coming the other direction. And certainly in Cambridge, that's a common complaint with all of the crossroads intersections there. So then reasons for traffic calming can seem quite obvious around schools and other high pedestrian areas, and indeed in our Victoria Street and Alexandra Street, we have traffic calming there with gardens and the like. Which makes for an attractive environment and town centre. So we also want to keep the right traffic on the right roads and give the appropriate levels of service to different types of traffic. And increasingly we see that subdivision developers want traffic calming within their subdivisions, and they're very actively building it, spending the extra money because residents want to live in streets where speeds are slower and their families are safer. So it's more and more common to see. So just on that next slide, some international examples there. Well, the top two is Auckland and Nelson, but then in the bottom two pictures we have in the UK where speed cushions are doing the job there in bollards and changed to the width of the street. And in Australia, in Victoria, there's chicanes which slow the traffic down on that street. So it is very common all around the world. So then what works well and what doesn't work? We know that narrowing the road, creating chicanes, from I guess, detailed studies of different types of traffic calming, vertical deflection is one of the most effective ways to slow people down, platforms, humps and cushions. Of course, at intersections, roundabouts and traffic signals do the same job. And in our town centres, landscaping is another effective mechanism. We need it to be affordable and easily maintained. Things that don't work well, if we just put up a speed limit sign and some paint on the road, that might work for a very short time, but typically won't have a long-term effect. Rubber bumps can be used temporarily, but they do tend to fall apart after a year or two, depending on the traffic volume on them. But they're great for a short term and a low cost fix. From experience, very narrow traffic lanes and islands will often get damaged and lead to complaints from road users that it was unreasonably narrow and I've bent my wheel on it and things like that. So not the sort of thing we want to do. But then in terms of Waipa, what have we heard from our community about traffic calming? So certainly we've heard from residents, pedestrians and cyclists who enjoy the calmer street and safer streets. But we also hear from people who say, look, there's too much change. We're seeing too many of these things. They don't understand the need. They're all about their car journey, and so they're not thinking of any other road users. Some say the bump is too severe, that emergency services will be slowed. Some would rather we spent money on road maintenance and not on speed bumps or islands or anything else. We've had some, particularly if they've got cars that, dare I say it, have been lowered right down so that they just clear the road surface. They're concerned about damaging their vehicles. We hear from some who are not sure when they get to a pedestrian crossing point that's just a raised safety platform, whether they should give way to pedestrians or not. But indeed, that's not a bad thing. If they're unsure and they decide to stop for a pedestrian, particularly a young, vulnerable pedestrian or an older person, that's probably a really good thing. Then, of course, we'd had some criticism when I think the Herald published a story about Auckland Transport's speed bumps and said it was costing $500,000. And then that myth was kind of repeated by politicians and got a whole lot of people thinking that that was the cost of them, when in fact Auckland Transport had provided lots of information to the newspaper showing that they were not that expensive at all. And they did print a retraction on page 5, a week later. But I guess the complicating factors.
Could I just make a little comment about uncertainty about where to give way to pedestrians? As most of you know, I have a son who lives in Canada, and on their suburban streets, if you even look like you're going to cross the road, no matter where, a car will stop for you and let you go. It just seems to be part of the culture. I'm not talking about the busy roads, but if you're in a suburban street, and as you say, that basically is a good thing. The pedestrians are the one who are vulnerable. So
yes, that's right. Absolutely. That the motorist who's driving 2 tons or 2.5 tons of steel, if they do pull up and stop for the young pedestrian, then that's the best thing. Yep. Okay, so I guess complicating factors. We do have in our growing towns, we have increasing traffic volumes with growth. We certainly need to increase walking and cycling and bus use to both provide equitable and sustainable transport modes for our communities. We obviously have car drivers who have had many, many years of priority infrastructure for them. So it's an adjustment that they're being asked to make, and some don't understand why. As I mentioned, we've certainly had some politicisation of traffic calming. And we've had issues around affordability and when we've had to do temporary works, and some in the community are not appreciative of anything that looks temporary. So those are complicating factors. So what does it cost? So it's quite variable depending on the scale, the traffic volumes. When we work in very busy streets like Cambridge Road and Shakespeare Street, we've got to do it all at night so that we can work around the traffic and put reasonable detours in place. Within subdivisions, they're often building this traffic calming out of concrete because they can close the road and have no traffic at all, and they can wait for 3 or 4 weeks for the concrete to set strong enough for traffic to then drive on it. But we're pretty much limited to using either a rubber preformed product or asphalt. And so Asphalt, when it comes out of the plant, it's heated to about 160, 170 degrees Celsius. And when they get it to the site, they've got to compact it when it's around 150 degrees Celsius. Otherwise, it'll set and they can't compact it. And of course, the asphalt is being placed for these speed tables often by hand because there's no paving machine invented yet which can create a ramp. So we've got staff on the site tipping asphalt out of the back of a truck and leveling it with screeds and things at 150 degrees Celsius and then compacting it. And they've got to get that level just right because the asphalt, you know, goes on this thick and it compacts down to this thick. So that difficulty of getting, you know, just the right shape and then running the rollers over it and getting it to compact to the right shape. So it's quite tricky. And hence it does cost a bit of money.
Marie.
Kia ora, Brian. I just want to ask one question because picking up on the bumps being severe stuff, there's a slowing bump outside the Glenview New World. If anyone's gone over that one there, that is marvellous, that one. And I'm wondering why we can't replicate that type of one across some of our areas because that one makes everyone slow down, but it just seems to have a much nicer on and off to the rest of them. I don't know.
Yes, yeah.
Have to agree, Marie. And it's almost like it's steep to get onto, but it's a nice, like a ramp off it. Seems to work quite well without the jarring approach.
Yeah, so I guess our Shakespeare Street one is more like that, and that we've got, and the standards which are listed in the back there with some links if people want to go and have a look. So the standards recommend if you're going to slow the traffic in a local street down to sort of 15 or 20 kilometres an hour so that kids can make judgments about getting across the road to school and things like that, then you've got to have steeper ramps because you really are trying to slow them down. But on a state highway like at Glenview, where there's a lot of buses and trucks, they've probably gone for the absolute flattest grade possible, which is good in that situation. There's, you know, the bus stops each side, all the bollards and the traffic signals and everything there. So it's a bit of a different environment, but you could certainly travel over those bumps at 40 kilometres an hour or, you know, in a big SUV, 50 kilometres an hour without slowing down much at all, which would not be ideal if you had a vulnerable road user who didn't push the button or the traffic didn't slow down for a red signal. Yeah. So certainly horses for courses. Yeah. So yeah, what does it cost? If we just do a very simple temporary rubber or small asphalt speed bump and we don't have to change the road width or footpath levels and things, we can do it for probably $20,000 or less. But by introducing this bump on the road, often it affects the drainage paths and the curbs each side. And then when we have to put in extra catch pits and pipes and things and maybe deal with vehicle crossings or other things, then the costs can escalate quite quickly. I think the one in Shakespeare Street, the value of the speed table and narrowing the lanes and things was, you know, getting up to $100,000 worth of work.
Lou.
I just want to admit, with this traffic coming, I'm very much for it. But when we consider it, we've got to consider the different type of vehicles that operate on our road.
Yes.
And we've still got some smaller vehicles that are operating with tyres that are actually 13 or 14 inch. And they are much, much lower to the road. And they find that, whereas I've got a car with 21 inch wheels. So I navigate that quite easily.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is
Yeah.
there's quite a variable. Put a little bit of load in one of those cars and that standard speed hump does become quite an obstacle.
Right.
And just something to keep in the back of our minds when we're orchestrating these things. So, it's something that as a mechanic, I do know that there's quite a big variation of vehicles.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, you know, if we get it right most of the time with that hot asphalt, then it should suit most vehicles. And but we have, you know, we've identified some that the grades are not right and you see the odd scrape mark on them. So we have arrange with a contractor to, he's got a grinding machine which is used for grinding concrete. So we're going to trial that on one and see how well that works in terms of being able to just round off the edges and improve it.
It's just the
And if-
initial height.
Yeah.
It's just the initial height of entry that catches the car as it leaves and catches
Actually,
the tow
often,
bar or catches the,
yeah, often it's leaving. It's
Yeah,
the
leaving,
departure
yeah.
ramp
it's
where,
dropping down.
yeah,
Mm.
because they've come up the first one and the ramp table across, and then when they drop down, that's when they're more likely to catch. So yeah, those are the ins and outs of it. So how have we engaged with our community when we get requests, and we do get requests come in from schools, retirement villages. It can be linked to development. So a new subdivision's going in and they need a mechanism to be able to get from their new subdivision across a busy road to the footpath or something like that. So Frontier Road in Te Miru is one of those, with a big new subdivision and retirement village, footpath on the opposite side of the road. So they've got a crossing point. So generally we will be sharing those treatment options with the community boards and council before there's some community engagement. So certainly the big projects that have been running went to the community boards first, and the service delivery committee to look at the designs before they went out for community engagement. And then on those streets, they had letters delivered and they were invited to drop-in sessions to come and talk about the designs. And we've also shared our plans with the emergency services, and the emergency services have got a standard that they promote to local authorities when building traffic calming. So we have done our best to comply with that standard, and I'm pretty sure I have included that. Yes, it's a second background reading item there for an emergency report on traffic calming. So looking forward to the future, you know, how do we manage this activity better? You know, so ideally we can have good planning and good infrastructure that manages speeds, and certainly where new infrastructure is being built, that's what we're aiming to do. But it does all cost money. So we're often in the situation of dealing with existing problems that are coming up. We can have policies for traffic calming in certain situations, that sort of 80-20 rule, where like Auckland Transport have a policy document on speed platforms, have practice notes, determining what sort of grades, what sort of ramps and lengths for different types of traffic, which I think is a very useful sort of guide document. We can continue to educate the public about the needs and benefits of speed management, traffic calming. And we're certainly going to continue to refine the engineering work. So I think we've got better and better at it the more we've done it. A lot of our contractors are coming into it fairly new, and even some of the experienced contractors still will manage to get it wrong the first time. But as our population grows and the potential for resident and pedestrian vehicle conflicts increase, we'll need to have a common understanding and a good way of dealing with these issues. Just on the next slides there, I've just got some Waipa examples. Obviously the top one is the Shakespeare Street, the trucks sort of passing over the crossing, and that's in the bottom left, we're looking at the crossing point for the pedestrians there. And we've certainly had good feedback from pedestrians using that crossing on a regular basis, how much safer they feel. Then in Bryce Street, top right, where we've got small roundabouts. So both the Alpha and Queen intersections on Bryce Street had regular crashes with people failing to stop or give way. So the raised sort of platforms and the mini roundabouts should put paid to future crashes. And the same for Rollison Street there in Kiki, again at a crossroads intersection that was did have some quite serious crashes at that location because of people failing to give way. So again, the crossings and the roundabout there will make improvement. Roger? Madam Chair? Oh, I've just got one last slide. Yep. And then, so this next one here in Thornton Road is basically a semi-permanent, part temporary. So we were called upon, new commercial business there, a lot more people crossing the street, but also a revamp of the playground in the Lake Te Akutu, meaning a lot more people were crossing the road here. So that traffic calming has worked well at a relatively low cost to improve that. Great big wide street, and otherwise people going pretty quick. But yeah, that is the end of the presentation, and happy to take questions.
Roger, then Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Brian. Now, I've got 4 questions to ask, so can I request your forbearance on the time that this might take, as some of the questions do have references to specific materials. So if you bear with me on that. First one's actually quite a quick question, having said that, but I think that's an interesting presentation. To start with, can you outline to us what you are seeking as an outcome from this meeting?
Yes, I was asked to present information about traffic calming. So I hope that at the end of this, councillors are informed and had an opportunity to ask questions about traffic calming. Okay. So you're not seeking any guidance or direction from council in terms of future management of calming? Or in education. Okay. So second question, can I refer you to the information I sent to you, which unfortunately was declined to be included in your presentation? And I was given the reason why, but there was quite a bit of important information in there. However, all councillors have received it. Can I refer you to page 7 of your presentation, where you referred to emergency services being slowed? The email from Robert Hoss from Fire and Emergency Services outlines the impact of traffic calming on the timing of response, quality of outcomes for emergency victims, and negative impact on the integrity of emergency vehicles. In a survey of operation firefighters, and to quote, do traffic calming congestion measures cause undue, and I emphasize undue, delay in response to emergency incidents? And the response there from the officers was 100%. Yes. And do delays caused by traffic calming congestion measures increase negative outcomes for patients when responding to medical calls, heart attacks? They've got hangings and stabbings, and their response was 100%. In fact, all of the 15 questions that were asked of those emergency officers gave a high level of agreement of concern against traffic calming. Do you think that these responses would also be reflective of the Cambridge fire officers? Yeah, I know that we've had conversations with the Cambridge fire officers. I think, Eric, you would have been at the last one. Do you have any feedback from them about traffic calming at all? Sorry to put you on the spot, but you were in the meeting with fire and ambulance and police, weren't you?
Yeah. So as part of the Cambridge Pathway project, we met with emergency services probably over a period of 2 or 3 years, several times, maybe even 4 or 5. And their main call-out corridor remains at Victoria Street. They prefer to exit from the, especially the fire service, Duke Street onto Victoria Street and into the call-out. And they prefer that road because of the wide shoulders and the cycle lanes. So there's lots of room for cars to pull over and pass. They wanted 2 lanes on the Bryce Street corridor of the cycleway, and they were happy with that and with the traffic calming that we had, because that wasn't their main call-out corridor. So that was kind of a backup for them. And then there was some discussion about some of their volunteers getting to the station quickly.
Yep.
And some of them, I think, still use Bryce Street. But the last 2 times we met with that emergency services group, that the issue wasn't raised.
Yeah, it's the feedback that I've had from local officers, particularly in regards to Cambridge Road, Hamilton Road, Kelly Road, those 3 in a row, is that has created the fact that they won't use that because it is just a risk to patients. And this is the St. John's as well as the fire department. So that has become quite a challenge because they've had to go longer way round, and time can be of the essence.
So they had discussed Cambridge Road with us, but it wasn't at that level of angst. They said, hey, it's a concern, and we have, like as Brian described, got a plan to alleviate some of those RSPs on Cambridge Road. But so at a staff level, we've never been alerted that they're not using it.
If I can just add there too, I mean, I attend the Cambridge Volunteer Fire Brigade awards evenings and things, and it's never been raised directly with me, although this recent meeting, the recent event I attended, they did raise the issue of the cheese cutters on the state highway causing some challenges in terms of their ability to get to accidents on the, using that. But so that has caused some problems, but that came with a rider that there's been a steep reduction in head-on collisions or accidents because of the cheese cutters. So that was something that they did raise with me, but not the other issues they've never raised with me.
Comment that was given to me was by a senior officer of St. John. But I'll just go on.
So a question on that, which I was going to ask, is so Cambridge Road there, C1 and 2, when the roundabout's done and the underpass is in, will some of those speed bumps be removed? So to have 3 speed bumps and controlled traffic lights and an underpass, is that an overkill? One or 2 of those can be removed?
Yeah, so certainly the Hugo Shaw Drive intersection has got a raised safety platform at the moment, and that was required as a temporary measure because that's the only way to turn right in or right out of that subdivision until the roundabout is built. But later on, once the roundabout is in place, that one could be removed if the right turn is banned. Yeah.
So potentially it could be 1 removed, still be 2.
Yeah, we would have the raised one at the signalised pedestrian crossing, but we certainly be open to reviewing the one that's across the town belt area. So what we'd like to do, obviously when we get to the end of the cycleway project, there's a monitoring and measuring and surveying process that we need to do to, I guess, see both to report back to the council, but to NZTA on the use of the funding for the cycleway. And so we have got this in 2025, this monitoring, surveying exercise planned and reporting back. And we'll certainly be looking at the traffic calming measures and the speeds that people are actually travelling over them, and measuring the speeds with traffic counters, have traffic volumes changed as a result of the works. So we will be able to review, I guess, particularly Cambridge Road at that point and make decisions around, do we change things further?
Yeah, because Cambridge Road, Hamilton Road, that's a major arterial, and it's also a bus route. And there are a lot of authorities that actually don't allow speed humps on public transport routes. So, second question is, can I now move to refer you to page 9 when you say that the preferred plan shared with adjacent residents and community through letters and press releases. Now, in the Wilson Bryce Alpha project, I can't remember the name of it, but it doesn't matter, and I was involved with some of that consultation with you. And I refer you to the plan that we used, which was this one that went out. And actually on page 4 of those maps, it shows the Bryce Grey Hall section of Alpha Street. Now, that map that was used for consultation didn't include any reference in that section to speed humps. And actually in communication with Dawn, I just followed that up. And actually on that section, there was no traffic monitoring, no speed monitoring. There was no resident requests for speed mitigation. There was no prior consultation with affected parties such as the RDA. There was no evidence of safety or risk concerns. Well, there were 2 CRMs back in 2014. So I'm just wondering, how was the decision made to install those speed bumps in that road? It doesn't follow any of what you've said, like you refer to the residents or you discuss with residents. There doesn't appear to have been any of that done for the installation of those speed humps.
Yeah, no, it's quite possible that we missed a step there. It's when this project was kind of fast-tracked in terms of development, apply for the funding from the government and then get on, and originally it had to be built and complete by 30th of June 2024. So it was rush. And we had the concept design initially that we went out and shared with the public, but the detailed design plans weren't completed till later. So yeah, we may well have missed a step. We know obviously when the Riding for Disabled did contact us, they had concerns about the speed bump or the raised safety platform, but also the visibility coming out of the entranceway. So we were certainly able to fix the visibility issue for them.
I can tell you that there's been considerable reaction from the residents as well, because they see absolutely no need for speed humps on that road, either from volume or speed. So that's an important step that you actually missed. Now, on page 13, you provide additional reading, traffic calming initiatives and devices, etc. But looking at a New Zealand perspective, there are a number of local communities and authorities that are having heated discussions over speed bumps. And I just look at Auckland, Queenstown, Hamilton, Welcome Bay, Tauranga, and that's just a few of them. I believe there's considerable Cambridge community, and I'm talking about Cambridge because, you know, that's where there are a lot now of speed bumps, negativity over our current speed bump installation. Now, Queenstown Council went so far as to develop their own speed bump policy, recording limitations and conditions. So there was a policy that you had to go through before a speed bump was accepted. Now, coincidentally, although you have mentioned a lot of the positives of speed bumps, in their policy, they actually do identify the negatives to a community of speed bumps. An increase in noise, and you've accepted that with cars, vehicles, and commercial vehicles hitting the speed bumps. Nuisance value to law-abiding motorists. Creating problems for emergency vehicles, buses, and heavy traffic, particularly if too steep or too high. And we've actually identified on Hamilton Road and on Alpha Street, where in fact the speed bumps are too high. Increased exhaust emissions and fuel consumption through acceleration and deceleration. Encouraging motorists to use alternative routes, which may not be appropriate, so they're being forced to use local roads. Damaging some vehicles. For this reason, they should only be used on low speed roads and limited in size. Reducing the carrying capacity of the road. In some cases being a traffic hazard on corners, not clearly visible, interfering with road drainage, etc. Interfering, well, we don't have this, snow removal, that was particularly South Island. Encouraging gutter running to avoid the effects of speed hump. Would you consider perhaps a Waipa District Council speed hump policy so that we can lay down some guidelines and some conditions for speed humps? Because it is a community concern.
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly that's something I mentioned on my slide. How do we engage with the community? That we could have policies and better planning and everything to manage this sort of activity. But I guess for our towns, Te Awamutu and Cambridge, we actually have relatively low levels of traffic calming and speed tables compared to those other cities you mentioned. Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga. I worked in Tauranga for 10 years and built a lot of traffic calming devices in Tauranga and around the Mount. And you know, they, as a city, they suffer with boy racers racing round and round, but also really high traffic volumes in a tourist sort of town that just made the lives of residents miserable. So they did certainly go all out and do a lot of traffic calming. And we've seen Auckland and Hamilton, other big cities have often done that to a much bigger scale than we have here at Waipa. But you know, certainly what you mention is that whole, those issues, what do the public think? What do the fire service think? They are all sort of change management issues that, because often the case once, you know, traffic calming has been in a street or an area for many years, it just becomes background, a background issue, you know, so it's, yeah, I certainly agree we need to make sure we get it right. And if anything we build is not right, we need to get to correct it. But I would caution against sort of drawing a line under this or drawing a line through this important sort of safety tool and speed calming tool that a lot in the community will actually grow to like or enjoy in their street.
Did you read the Queenstown policy?
I did have a look at it, yes. Yes, that's right. So I know Queenstown, I mean, for many years, they probably had 0 speed calming and a lot of tourists, a lot of traffic. Well, you know what it's like there. If you visited in sort of peak tourist season, it can be bumper to bumper and traffic is going through all sorts of streets that it probably shouldn't to try and get around congestion. So I can well imagine that they've had to implement some speed calming.
I'm just going to pass on to you that I think from what I'm gathering from the community, there is concern over the policy and they would like to be ensured that there's some control over the plethora of speed humps and speed mitigations that are being introduced in Cambridge. So it is a big concern over there. So perhaps you may give another thought to perhaps developing a policy
Thanks,
we
Roger.
can contribute to.
I've got Bruce and then Andrew. I'm just really mindful of the time. We only had a set time for this because we have another workshop afterwards. So Bruce, the floor is yours.
Gentlemen, this is quite an easy one, a Harpo State Highway 3. When the pavement's rehabilitated, because it's pretty bad at the moment, will that calm the bars? Like they are quite severe at the moment. I thought you said they lay a big bit. Will that maybe smooth them in the future?
There's certainly the approach as you're heading north has got a bit of a dip in the pavement in front of the speed table, which will be improved when they finish their pavement works. The two smaller bumps each side, they have to take those out when they do the pavement work and they'll put them back again, but they've got opportunity to maybe smooth them a little bit more. But interestingly, if you're there watching traffic crossing them, big trucks and buses, and I've ridden the bus over them many times, they feel very smooth and the trucks are not having to slow down to a crawl or anything. So the big vehicles are going over them, no trouble. Cars are slowing right down because, as Lou was saying, with those smaller cars, they feel it a bit more. So I think on balance, they're actually working pretty much as they are intended.
Yeah, no, I haven't got any complaint with them. I think that they're fantastic, but when you compare what Dale Marie said about Glenview, I think that's a 25 and I think they are 25s from memory. There's a total different experience. I know the one at Glenview is a lot longer, but these are shorter, but yeah, it's not.
Cheers, Bruce. Andrew, then Mike.
I'll be I'll be quick. Look, I'm not a fan of speed bumps, all right? I think they're, but unfortunately, they're necessary. I'm not a fan of them because many of the things Roger said are absolutely right, particularly fuel usage and whatever. But if we were compliant with our road signs, we wouldn't need speed bumps and traffic calming at all. We're not, so quid pro quo. And look, there's like lots of things. There's give and take. Because we have speed bumps, cars are going slower, less pedestrians and cyclists are getting run over and knocked off their bikes. So there's maybe a reduction in emergency service need to some extent. Fully accept that, when emergency services are required, they're being slowed by them too. I mean, it's give and take. But being a bit specific, the speed bumps on Whitmore Street and Kiki seem to be particularly vicious. Is there any comment on that, Brian?
Yes, there's two locations there, again, on that departure ramp that we've got our eye on that we want to smooth a bit. Yep.
Thanks, Brian. Mike, just before we round this one up.
Thank you, through the chair. Hey, thanks for this workshop and also for holding it off. I was in China last month, I think. And so it's actually good to be involved. So first of all, thanks for all the work that's gone into this. And look, a lot of it has come off the back of these new cycling and cycleways in particular. Andrew, you made some good points about if we actually adhered to the rules, we wouldn't be having this conversation, but unfortunately people don't. Some of these things like the speed cushions, I think are absolutely great, and though they look temporary, they actually seem to be lasting, like on Thornton Road there. They definitely do slow traffic down at a very low cost. I guess picking up on Roger's points, if I liken it to wheelchair access, wheelchair access, there is a standard. It's not like do what you want sort of thing. There's a standard to the slope over distance. So I think what Roger's asking for maybe, and I would totally support that, rather than this speed bump's great and this one, these two aren't, and then we go and mitigate it afterwards, if the contractors had a standard for the type of road, because I'm hearing that too, that different types of road would have different standards because you need to slow traffic down more or less. Could that sort of be developed? So then when the methodology or the standard came to the contractor, it's like, this is what it needs to make the egress and the coming on, coming off and the height. And because it seems to me the technical bit is not the platform, but the entrance and the exit, because it's a live thing we're dealing with. But there's obviously ways to mitigate it, either during it or after it.
Through you, Madam Chair. No, you're absolutely spot on. And that Auckland Transport document, Council could just say, well, that's the standard we'd like to have. It's perfectly good. And it talks about the different types of traffic and the different slopes of ramps. The complicating factor, which is what I mentioned earlier, it's making that ramp out of asphalt, which is at 150 degrees. So you can't get too close to it because it's going to burn you even if without touching it. And the fact that our roads are not, you know, when they draw an engineering drawing and they show a grade like this, but our road is not perfectly flat. Our road has got a shape on it like this across the cross section if you cut through it. So you've got a ramp which you're trying to make it follow that shape a bit and keep a constant grade where it's coming down to meet a different level of the road across the width of the road. So it's actually a lot more complicated than it looks. So yeah, certainly that's why our contractors are coming to grips with it to find out, you know, what works and what doesn't. And yes, we do give them plans and grades and things that they've got to work to, but it's really quite difficult to get it spot on. But we're getting better at it. Our contractors are getting better at it.
Yeah, I guess what it would do is would just, the public are really interested in the end result. Unfortunately, not the engineering part or the construction. They're just paying for the result. So I guess something like Auckland or an adaptation of that would give the end result to the residents. And I guess what's brought this up is not that maybe compared with other towns or cities we have got too many or not enough, or actually we haven't got that many compared with others. It's more maybe the point in the speed that they've come online because of the cycleways largely. And I think people are a bit concerned is this the end of it? Is this the beginning? Is this, you know, the beginning of what might come? What controls do we have? And I think that's what we're hearing out in the community. So yeah, just a couple of thoughts there. One around the methodology, whether that's a policy or methodology, and the other is just that would actually then give that methodology or policy, the public some assurance that these are the sorts of roads and these are the sorts of conditions that would a speed, not a speed bump, but speed reduction options would be looked at.
Thanks, Mike. Last comment, Philip.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and keep it brief. So Taylor Street in Grosvenor outside the high school there, and Thornton Road opposite the new Foursquare, and the playground's been there forever. So those temporary rubber mats or whatever there, so one question is, when would you decide to put chicanes in there rather than bumps or in any place? And is there money in the budget to do something more permanent there? Because obviously the school's going nowhere, Foursquare and playground on Thornton Road are going nowhere. I mean, they're there to stay forever, sort of thing. So yeah, so when do you decide chicanes or bumps? And secondly, is there something there for something more permanent?
Yeah, I guess that, yeah, when do you decide chicane or a bump? It really is the particular road environment and what you're trying to achieve and what the constraints might be in terms of the existing width of the road, where vehicle crossings and things are. So I couldn't say, you know, just today whether chicanes would be a good idea for either of those locations without thinking about it in more detail. But in terms of when would we make them permanent, I think next month we'll have a paper to council about road improvement budgets, and that would be a good opportunity to talk about, you know, funding and what's possible in the future.
Yeah, so both those roads aren't your typical sort of urban streets where some of the back streets are more urban, where they're a lot quieter. They're quite busy ones. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for that. And so with that said, we'll bring that workshop to a conclusion and move on to the next one, which is yours in any event, Eric. Setting speed limits, overview of the new speed setting rule.
Thank you, Madam Chair and councillors. Right. So, yeah, okay, the purpose of this workshop is to explain the new rule we have regarding setting of speed limits. We want to, I guess, discuss any council community priorities and talk about funding timing for any changes. So the background, there's been a bit of a tricky situation that there was a rule published in 2022, and now we have, 2 years later, we've got another rule. There are differences. So we've kind of spent 2 years doing almost nothing. We've done lots of planning in the background, but yeah, no actual implementation or consultation. The last set of changes were made in December 2019, when council did, I think, around 200 changes. And these changes are not affected by the new rule. They missed that deadline by, I think, a couple of months. So yeah, so there's no change in what we've done to date. So what's changed? So district-wide speed management plans are now optional. There's no requirement for regional or Waikato Regional Council coordination or planning. The new rule gives a lot better guidance on what the appropriate speeds for different roads should be. There's a simpler process for changing or setting speed limits. The school speed limits are a lot clearer, sort of more clarity and guidance, and not really changed, but our previous, well, our current speed limit bylaw is now redundant and can be revoked. And it'll be a subject of a future paper, yeah.
Okay, cool. I was just trying to reconcile that with the earlier statement that the speed limits under that previous bylaw were unchanged. I'm just trying to reconcile those in my small brain.
So the last changes in December 2019 were completed, I recall, under that bylaw, but the new land transport rule did talk about revoking some recent changes for all road controlling authorities, but we've missed that. So those changes were made in December 2019 are not impacted by the new rule.
So the differentiation here is that changes are not revoked, that they're fine, but the actual bylaw is redundant.
Yes. Yeah.
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 It's easy.
Yeah, I can
The
clarify,
lawyer
Madam
and me
Chair.
struggling with that.
Yeah, I can clarify, Madam Chair. Yeah, so once the
No
bylaw.
bylaw, then how are the
Yes, I-
restrictions?
I can clarify,
effective?
Madam Chair. So once upon a time, the bylaw with its maps and schedules was, with council's seal on it, was the absolute record of the speed limit. And so if police were prosecuting somebody and they wanted to go back to the evidence of where the speed limits were, from and to, they would go to the bylaw document. But since the 2022 speed limit setting rule, all council's bylaw information, maps and schedules have been uploaded into a national speed limit register, which is a mapping tool online. And so that becomes the authoritative record of speed limits. So a bylaw is no longer needed for that record.
Cool, thank you for that explanation. I was struggling in my head on that.
Okay. So there's two ways we can change speed limits. We can do a district-wide speed management plan and get it approved by NZTA, or we can do discrete individual changes with NZTA approval.
Hello.
So, thank you. So when you say discrete changes, a couple of slides back, it said it's made a lot simpler. How's it? I mean,
So previously we had to work through a speed management plan, which no, we don't, yeah, because the speed management plan tends to be district-wide, and then you have to talk about the issues at a district-wide level. Whereas now we can just basically respond to a specific issue individually without considering any other part of the district.
So a question we've had before is, say, Thornton Road, going past Oaklands out that way, 50 Ks, which seems to be really slow along there compared to other urban streets, which it's big and wide and et cetera, et cetera. So how simple would it be able to get that changed to 60 Ks, say? Before you had to go down through a whole heap of roofs.
So if I could just carry on, we described it a bit further into the presentation.
Yeah, how about we just let the gentleman carry on? Sorry, I interrupted you because I was trying to get my head around the revoking and sticking, but how about we just go through the chunkier bits in terms of how they can be changed?
So before we can make any change, we have to do a cost benefit analysis that considers safety impacts, travel time impacts, and the cost of implementation. We have to consult in accordance with Section 82 of the Local Government Act. We've got to comply with NZTA and government policy statement guidance, and there's lots of technical requirements in the new rule, detailed technical requirements. And then a big part of the new rule is regarding speed limits outside schools. So the 2022 rule did have mandatory speed limits, but these are now better defined. So category 1 schools, which are urban ones, have a mandatory 30 km/h speed limit. Category 2, which is rural schools, a mandatory 60 km/h speed limit, and these are variable, as I'll describe later. And then there's a specified length of these speed limits in reference to how you access the school as a pedestrian. And there are some exemptions in terms of surrounding existing speeds. The speed limit outside schools, it's only during school travel periods, which is when the school's open and for a period before and after that opening and closing of the school. There's a requirement for us to comply by 1 July 2026 for these new limits. And some of our existing urban schools already have a variable 40 km/h speed limit, and these are not required to be changed. But we may, there might be power in the consistency of a 30, but I guess that'll come out in the consultation. So in terms of our priorities, so we have to comply with the rules regarding schools. We have received quite a lot of community requests to lower some speed limits, also from the police. And as we respond to growth in our urban areas, we have to do some changes based on growth of our towns. So the other key takeout is NZTA has not provided any funding for these requirements. Our costs will depend on, especially in relation to schools, how many schools are impacted. Some schools are close together and that low speed zone may connect between schools. There's a lot of consultation required. Which will need a lot of staff effort, and then a physical works required is to be confirmed as well. And we have limited funding for this, and I think,
The next month will cover.
Yep. So the paper next month will deal with that. And the next step is, so I guess as staff, we want to prepare a paper to service delivery in the new year that provides options and some decisions for approval. And then, we can implement those approved limits. Or I guess when I say implement, start the consultation process on those proposals.
Thanks, Eric. Roger.
Thanks. I'm not too sure this is a question for you or for Mike, because when you look at the placement of Cambridge Primary and you draw a 300-metre ring around 45 minutes before, 45 minutes after opening time, how is that going to be policed? Because, I mean, It's right in the middle of town.
Through the chair, so there's ambiguity in the rules. So is it 300 metres from the gate in both directions, or is it centred on 300 metres? So 150 plus. So that's not clear. Our proposal is, well, what we will do at staff level, we'll consult with other road controlling authorities and NZTA and get clarity on the new rules. And there's some other councils which have got some pretty significant issue with the new rules. So the clarity will come over the next 6 months to a year.
Not going to be easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike.
Thank you, through the mayor. Yeah, I thought that would be the answer there. There has to be some common sense around that, around schools that are in the middle of towns and things. Look, Hautapu Road, which I guess Hautapu School has made contact there, and yeah, that whole straight, just as a specific example, those schools like that, when the time comes, I'm sure a reduction will be hopefully imminent. My question really though is actually around the papers coming to us next month. What's coming back to us at the start of next year? The paper, and then the consultation period starts on whatever.
So the service delivery paper with recommendations on how we proceed. And I guess what we can talk about some of the thinking today. Yeah, and it's probably not so much, I think the schools, we're in a set regime with the rule, but the likes of Hautapu Road, Liam Street, Racecourse Road, there's actually it's probably a dozen other hotspots where the request has been for reductions of speed limits, and how we deal with those in our constrained funding environment.
Yeah. So I guess my question is around those specifics is just, is there going to be a time frame with consultation to get whatever the end result is into the next LTP? Is that the goal to put forward into the next LTP for consideration? Will it be in time?
Yeah, certainly I'd say that will be part of it, but the current 3-year funding block that we're in to 2027, we'll have we've got some requirements where the rule says we must use reasonable efforts to lower speed limits at schools. I think most of our rural ones are going to be okay. They've already got the 60 in place, but our urban schools are largely 40. And so in this remaining 2.5 years, will we lower the speed limits at the schools to 30? It talks about they have to be variable, and of course with 40 we don't have variable signs, they're just fixed 40 speed signs, and all this sort of scientific evidence is if you just put up a sign that says go at 30 morning and afternoon, people won't comply with that, but we know if you put up an electronic sign that flashes the bright 30 at the right time of day, then people will generally comply because they can see it. But we won't have the funds to do electronic signs.
All right. So that's sort of just my last comment. That sort of ties into a comment that was in that last conversation, that basically if something doesn't make sense, people really won't follow it. Or you've got to give them some additional influence. So the speed signs would be one thing, but again, this could almost tie back into that last conversation of that methodology and policy of traffic calming could be part of, rural schools, but not just rural schools. I'm not talking schools here. I'm just talking where it makes sense to slow traffic. A speed sign is one of the mitigations, but that policy could include other mitigations. Would that be possible to explore?
Yeah, so certainly through you, Madam Chair, around the country where local authorities did over the last 5 years or more, put in 30s at schools, they've either included electronic signs or a combination of electronic signs and traffic calming devices to make sure they got speeds down to the 30.
Thank you.
Yeah, Philip and then Lou.
Yeah, I mean, Goodwood School is actually working really well, and it's really effective. I mean, there's a lot of people going through there that are dropping their kids off, so they're conscious of it and they're slowing down. There's a lot of people go through there when they go to work every morning. I go through there when I'm coming here. But you got the flashing lights. It's got 60 Ks because there's a bit of a village there anyway, but you got the flashing lights during school hours, like what you said. But there's no chicanes, there's no bumps, there's no nothing, but it does seem to work really well, and you certainly don't hear of any incidents, which is great, which is fantastic. We don't want to hear incidents, but I mean, Hautapu is another one. It hasn't got the village around it like Goodwood has. Te Mero is also the same too. It's got the village. But it is certainly working really well. But yeah, and it's really simple. It looks simple anyway.
Lou.
Yeah, thank you through me. Just a quick observation more than anything. In the rural schools, a lot of the rural schools are actually around a community hub. Okay, and the 60 Ks that are standard at the moment actually operate very effectively for the community. And having them actually opened up only for the 45 minutes either side is probably not the best option for the local people. You've got a local hall there, I'll use Pahui, for example, which I'm very conversant with. You've got a kindergarten, you've got a hall, and you've got a school. You go out to Wairipapa. A similar sort of situation with halls, and these sort of areas. I've ridden through there on motorbikes and cars and all sorts of things, and you tend to slow, whether it's a Sunday or not. You see the 60 K. It operates as a safety factor for a place where kids go to play during the weekends, do things. So I'm going to ask another question: is that there would be a significant cost to our council if we have to implement the signage or something to change these to a limited time. And that would have to come into our LTP, wouldn't it? As I say, and has anyone done any costing or any ideology or, what that's going to actually cost?
No, not at this stage. I guess this rule was signed in at the end of September, so we haven't had a lot of time to think about it. And we were also advised at the same time that NZTA had cut all funding for road improvements and safety improvements, including for speed management. So we have heard that NZTA is reconsidering that if they want local authorities to do speed management, then they'll probably have to come up with some money. So we're waiting to hear from them whether they'll be able to do that. But I guess that's why when we come back to council with an option paper, it'll be around, what sort of timing, what sort of funding will we have available? What are our recommended requirements? And therefore, how would we prioritise that work? Because there will be limited funds and limited staff time to implement this. Yeah. But fortunately, the rule does say that if the school is within, like for our rural schools like Puahui and Te Mero and others, if they're already in an area which has a lower speed limit for a good reason, and it's supported by the rule, then there's a good chance we wouldn't have to make any change to the rural school speed limit. So,
just to advertise a little bit further, but if you go to Rotorangi, which is on a sharp turn by a building, the speed limit there operates very effectively for people to slow for that intersection and that sharp corner, and it does a good job. So, as I say, in keeping that.
But just one brief little statement. I mean, I've said it before, and it's probably controversial, but it's the locals that speed through these areas. It's not so much the visitors. It is locals, and I know I've been involved with Te Mero for a long time, and I know it's locals, and they've got to take a big responsibility here. I'm a local.
Great. So have you got the the guidance that you required from us? And I take it we're looking towards, as you mentioned before, a paper and which will come back to Claire's committee in the new year for options.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if you had any thoughts around timing as when you'd want consultation for any speed limit changes you do want to proceed with. I know there's a local body election next year, and sometimes controversial consultation is not ideal and that sort of time frame. But
yeah, I think it's probably more a case of saturation and
Yeah.
capacity between now and certainly embedding an LTP. So, yeah, my sense is that it's a very cluttered landscape at the moment, or will be going forward around consulting with our communities. So, yeah, I wouldn't, from my part, I wouldn't be busting a boiler to get it as a matter of urgency. I mean, there's the whole cost issue too. Appreciating that there are calls from the communities in certain places for reductions. I think we just have to be cognizant of engagement, community engagement, saturation. It's what we've got coming forward.
One thing you tried to highlight or highlighted was it's going to be simpler, so time will tell whether it is simpler.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. That was valuable.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, gentlemen. And that brings us to a conclusion for today's council